David Semobon is a promoter or concert manager in Australia. David's life can be said to be perfect. He has a wife named Helen, a cute family, and a successful business. He has no reason not to be grateful. One night, David told Helen that he planned to invest all the family's savings to hold a super grand concert and invite a famous singer from America. David was sure that this biggest concert in his career would be a huge success. Hearing her husband's ambition, as a wife, Helen could only support him. But unfortunately, everything did not go according to plan. That year, the Australian economy suddenly experienced a crisis. David's concert was deserted and a total failure. David went bankrupt. A week after the concert, David was seen trying to contact the manager of the singer from America to ask for a reduction in payment from the previous concert. He did not get any profit at all, even suffered a big loss, and all his savings were gone. However, his request was rejected because the singer had already performed. David still had to pay according to the initial agreement. He was weak. When he arrived home, his family and friends had prepared a surprise birthday party for him. That night, in the middle of the party, Helen announced that she was pregnant with her 7th child. Everyone was happy, except David. After the event was over, in his room, David finally gathered the courage to tell Helen that his concert last week was a total failure. "Now our family is in huge debt," he said quietly. Hearing the news, Helen was shocked. The next day, David tried to contact his friends one by one to ask for a job. Alhamdulillah, there was one friend who offered a job, but the location was in America. If he was interested, next week David could go and meet him in the city of Nashville. The next day, David had a discussion with Helen. "David, we promised to only need 2 years. After 2 years, when our family's economy is stable, then we can go back to Australia," Helen said. Although it was hard, Helen decided to trust her husband. A few days later, after selling the house to pay off debts and travel expenses, David and his family said goodbye to their grandparents. Before leaving, his mother gave Helen a letter and said, "Read this letter when you arrive in America." When everything was ready, David's family left. When they arrived in America, when the immigration officer asked how long David's family would be staying, David answered, 6 months. However, one of his children accidentally said, 2 years. The suspicious officer then took them to the examination room. Actually, because he didn't have enough money, David only took care of the visa for 6 months. After that period was up, he was forced to become an illegal immigrant for 2 years. Luckily, when the officer unpacked the suitcase, they found a letter from his mother. When they read it, the letter said, "See you in 6 months." Thanks to the letter from the mother, the officer finally believed them and allowed them to pass. Unfortunately, because they were checked for too long, they missed their flight and had to take the night train. At the transit station, David tried to contact his friend from a payphone. They were supposed to meet 2 days ago, but because he missed his flight, David had only just arrived now. Because there was no answer, David continued his journey. The next night, when they arrived at the rented house, they were all shocked. The house was empty, not a single item. Helen, who did not want her children to get sick, arranged clothes to be used as bedding. The next day, David went to see his friend. But before he could ask about the job, his friend told him that he had given the job to someone else because David didn't come yesterday, even though he had been waiting for him. Hearing that, David fell silent and limp. At home, when the story was told, Helen was shocked and said that she needed time to calm down. In her room, Helen cried, venting her anger. In the midst of despair, she saw a letter from her mother. The contents of the letter were indeed nothing special, but Helen remembered that thanks to the letter, her family could get to America. There must be God's plan behind all of this. After calming down, Helen, who was previously disappointed, now encouraged David. There is no other choice. Our family must join hands and fight together here, she said. That evening, David and Helen agreed to tell their children about their financial situation. Helen said, "Until Dad gets a job, we all have to save and help each other." The next morning, to make it easier to pass the tests of life, David and his family went to church. After the service, they met a very nice couple named Kay and Jet. That afternoon, at home, while cleaning the yard, a neighbor greeted them jokingly. "How about cleaning my yard too?" Hearing that joke, David's son got the idea for a house cleaning service business. Months passed. Although his cleaning service business was running smoothly, David still had not found a job. One day, when David and his family wanted to offer their services to the biggest house in the complex, when the owner opened the door, David was surprised. The owner of the house was a singer named Edie. In the past, when Edie was still starting his career as a singer, David always refused to let him perform at his concerts. In the past, David often refused amateur singers and only wanted to work with famous singers. Because he was embarrassed, David immediately asked his children to leave. Seeing David's difficult life now, Ed felt sorry for him and decided to hire their services as cleaners. While working, David kept watching Ed, who was busy taking care of his work schedule. He was so embarrassed. The person he used to look down on was now very successful. In his heart, David felt jealous. The day after, while the mothers were having a picnic, Kay invited Helen to his house tomorrow afternoon to celebrate Thanksgiving. "Don't worry, tomorrow I will ask my husband to pick up your family by car," said Kay. The next day, when Jet came to pick him up, he was confused as to why there was no furniture in David's house. In order not to offend, Jet just kept quiet, pretending not to see. When they arrived at Jet's house, before the event started, everyone sang together to express gratitude. When they heard the voice of David's daughter, Rebecca, everyone was silent in awe. Her voice was so beautiful. In the middle of the event, Jet said, "Rebecca, why not become a singer? David, why don't you try promoting Rebecca to a music producer?" Unfortunately, David was not interested. A few weeks later, on Christmas Eve, while David's family was eating, they suddenly heard a lot of car noises. When checked, it turned out that Jet, his friends and neighbors had come to bring various unused household items as Christmas gifts. Seeing their kindness, David's family was very touched. 3 months later, while washing, Helen suddenly had a stomach ache. She was about to give birth. David rushed her to the hospital. The 7th child was born safely. However, David's happiness immediately disappeared when he saw the very expensive hospital bill. Because he could not afford to pay, David begged the hospital to give him a discount. He promised that even though he had to pay in installments, he would definitely pay off his bill. The hospital staff, who took pity on him, also gave him a discount, not only allowing payment in installments. David also only had to pay half of his bill. Hearing that, David was relieved. But strangely, when the officer wanted to make a new bill, he was confused as to why the computer stated that David's bill status had been paid off. 3 days later, when they returned home, David and Helen were greeted by their 6 children. Kay and Jet were also there to visit. When everyone entered, David invited Jet to talk to him alone. David said that he knew for sure that Jet had paid his hospital bill. Instead of being grateful, David got angry. He told Jet to stop helping him. Initially, David could still accept the help. He was grateful to have a friend as good as Jet, even though they had only just met. But over time, his self-esteem, as the head of the family, felt destroyed. "From now on, please don't help me too much. I can take care of my own family," David said firmly. 1 month passed. David was seen trying to promote Rebecca to several music producers. However, not a single producer wanted to accept her. They thought that Rebecca was still not ready and often nervous when singing. The next day, when they were gathering, Rebecca told a story. "Yesterday, when I was cleaning Edie's house, I accidentally saw in a magazine that Edie was actually a singer and music producer." Rebecca suggested, "Why don't you try promoting me to Edie? We already know him," instead of having to go to the trouble of finding another producer. However, David immediately snapped. "You should be self-aware. We are just maids in Edie's house. Don't whine and ask for other people's pity." Rebecca, who was hurt, immediately sulked and left. Luckily, Mother immediately reconciled the father and daughter. 2 days later, David and Rebecca tried to meet the music producer again. Hearing Rebecca's melodious voice, the producer was interested. In fact, he said that next week, Rebecca could start practicing singing in his music studio. David and Rebecca were happy. But that night, their joy was shattered when Grandma suddenly called. She said that Grandpa had a heart attack and died. In the morning, David tried to contact the producer to ask for payment for the collaboration. He knew that Rebecca's payment was still a long way off. But right now he really needed the money for the fare to go back to Australia to see his parents. However, even though it had been explained at length, the producer refused to give the money and instead unilaterally terminated the collaboration for unreasonable reasons. David was disappointed. Emotionally, he slammed the phone down and vented his anger. Seeing how devastated her father was, Rebecca just kept quiet and sad. 4 days, David just lay in bed. He didn't want to get up. Didn't want to eat. As a wife, Helen kept trying to strengthen her husband. One day, to calm herself down, Helen took the children for a walk outside. In the park, one of her children sang a very beautiful song. They then told her that the song was written by Rebecca herself. When she got home, Helen told Rebecca about the song. Helen also said, "As parents, we always feel like we are struggling alone. In fact, our children are also struggling together. Not just Rebecca, but all of them. They have also given up their comfortable lives in Australia, left everything, to go far away to America to help their parents. So, I hope David doesn't give up. Be a great father. David is the head of the family, the pride of us all." Hearing that sentence, David cried with emotion. The next day, David finally started to get up. Then, he met the children. He apologized for being a cowardly father yesterday, who always blamed the situation. When Rebecca came, David said that he already knew that Rebecca wrote the song for the family. This time, David would swallow his pride, and he would try to meet Edie. The next day, after talking, David made an appointment with Edie to come to church to see Rebecca's performance. David had also made peace with Jet and asked Jet to play the piano to accompany Rebecca. Not long after, Edie and her friends came to see Rebecca's performance. Edie was amazed. After discussing with her friends, Edie told her that Rebecca was accepted and would soon be promoted. Hearing the decision, David's family was very happy because Rebecca had officially become a singer. To make it cooler, Edie wanted to make a new stage name for Rebecca. After discussing, everyone agreed to add the name of her late grandfather. Now, Rebecca's stage name is Rebecca James. 1 year later, her songs were successful, and she had become a famous singer. Today is her first concert. Before performing, Rebecca thanked her parents for her. It was not only her father who struggled here and there outside the house, but inside the house. Her mother also struggled hard to unite the family. For Rebecca, her mother and father are heroes.